And we are live. Hi, my name is Bart Weiss. I'm the director of the Dallas Video Festival. We've been doing these Google Hangouts to give you guys a sense of the great films that we have here. And this is a film that I've been hearing about for a long time, and you are going to be hearing about it for a really long time. It's very relevant to things that are going on. It's called Terror, but it's not just terror. It's T with parentheses around it, error, because there's so much error that goes on in the film, really aptly described. So we have the two filmmakers, David Felix Sutcliffe and Lyric Cabral, here with us.
Lyric R. Cabral. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Lyric R. Did you say?
Yes.
And what does the R stand for?
It's my mother's maiden name, so
okay.
Yes, it always goes in the name.
All right. Cool. My father's name was K, and it stood for nothing, except he called himself Kibitzer, which indeed he was. So, Lyric, why don't we start with you, because this whole project started with you, if I remember correctly. Is that right?
Well, it started with meeting a unique person who was my neighbor. So,
Right. So making good documentaries has something to do with having good neighbors.
Somewhat. Good access to your neighbors.
So tell me about your neighbor.
My neighbor was a very charismatic older man who at the time was about 55 years old. I saw him leave out. We shared a small brownstone in Harlem. And I would see him sort of leave the brownstone every day, dressed very dapperly. He was someone who was well known in multiple communities. Like everyone in Brooklyn knew him, everyone in Harlem knew him. He would know like the old people as well as the babies. Like he was just like a salient presence in the community. And he ultimately invited me into his apartment, which was 2 floors beneath mine in this brownstone. And we began to talk, and we became close over the course of 3 years. We had conversations almost every day about things ranging from current affairs to cultural events going on in New York City. And one day he just abruptly disappeared. We had planned, it was on a Thursday, it was May 28th, 2005 to be precise. And we had plans to sort of do something on a Saturday, I remember. And when I came home from school, I saw that his brownstone apartment was sort of empty. And he called me, sort of speaking in a frantic tone, and explained that he had to hastily leave New York, but that he was located in another state down south and wanted me to come visit because he had something to tell me. And when I went down south to visit him, he confessed that the apartment, that brownstone apartment in Harlem, in which we had become close over the course of 3 years, was paid for by the FBI. That location was essentially a safe house that was set up to aid in the investigation of Tariq Shah, who was someone who Saeed was helping to set up on suspicions of terrorism.
So how did you feel when you heard that? I mean, it sounds like you hear that from very many people, and essentially everything you knew about this person was not what you knew.
Well, it was somewhat repulsive, but it was also exciting because, again, I was sort of in journalism school, and this is the type of story you prepare yourself to tell when you're learning how to tell stories. You know, it's a character-driven story. Yeah. Someone with a fascinating history, arguably, moving forward, he would have equally as engaging stories because of what he was involved in, but it came with a tremendous sense of betrayal. But I would say that the sort of tremendous potential of his story always outweighed, for me, the power of that betrayal.
Yeah. So how did this come from a relationship to a film? When did you pitch this to him?
Well.
Okay. Is this where David comes in?
This is my cue.
All right. All right, David. How you doing?
I'm good. Let me go over my lines real quick. I think
I bet you've told this story about 6,000 times.
Like two or three. So Lyric and I met right around the same time that Saeed kind of disappeared from the brownstone, and we were both teaching at an after-school arts program in Harlem, where one of our students, a 16-year-old Muslim girl from Guinea, West Africa, was arrested by the FBI and accused of being a potential suicide bomber. And when that happened, that kind of it shocked all of us, and I think Lyric and I both started paying attention to what was happening in these counterterrorism cases, and I think in combination with Saeed's confession, she saw a new pathway of, a new beat opening up, if nothing else. And I ended up making a film about that young woman, Adama, and her family, and their experiences going through this ordeal. And ultimately, when I was wrapping up that project, Lyric asked, do you have any plans for a future project? And I said, well, since I've been working on this film and I've been studying all the terrorism cases, I see that in every single case, all these domestic terrorism cases, they seem to kind of pivot on an informant who is sent by the FBI into a community trying to find someone gullible enough or desperate enough to fall for their tricks and tactics and kind of tumble into these sting plots. And I said that would be an amazing film to make, just psychologically, the kind of person that does that work and the guilt they must feel knowing that this person will be set up or sent to jail potentially as a result of their relationship. And also politically, I think it's so important that more people understand the machinery of these cases and how fraudulent they are. And when I mentioned that, saying like this would be an amazing film, but in the next breath I said it's obviously an impossible story to tell because how are you ever going to find an informant who'd be willing to step in front of a camera? And she said, well, that's funny you should say that because I know one, and I think he might be interested. And it turns out that he was. And that's how everything kind of began.
So, Lyric, was it you that talked him into doing this? And was he? Why did he go for this?
I mean, well, really, he talked himself into doing it because when I met him, he was sort of at the height of his career, meaning at this point he had worked for the FBI for about 12 years, off and on. But at the time that we met was the apex of his career, meaning he was working one counterterrorism case here domestically, investigating Tariq Shah, and he was also managing simultaneously a case based in Germany wherein he was investigating Sheikh Mohammed al-Moyad, who at the time was suspected of being Osama bin Laden's financier. And so because I met him at this time where he was juggling sort of so much information and he was sort of engaged in creating these multiple personalities at very high levels, he was pretty much making all the money. He was very tight. There was nothing in his manner or bearing that would indicate that he worked for the FBI. In other words, I would have never known. Yeah. And so it didn't really take much to convince him because there's always been a part of him that's wanted to tell his story, that's wanted to sort of go on the record and disclose the work that he's done. So as far as, what did it take, that's something that internally Saeed has wanted to do for a while. I think that's what motivated his initial disclosure, and that's why you see him sort of as a willing participant in film.
Yeah, we always get the sense, as documentarians, we sort of thrive on people's desire to have their stories told, and but in this case, for what he's doing, I mean that could have been, it's not exactly what the FBI wants, and I don't know that he understood what it would all mean to have this photographed.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I think Saeed is, a very intelligent person and was well aware of the consequences of what his participation in this film would mean. And I think that was intentional because, as Lyric said, when she first met him, he was at the height of his career making hundreds of thousands of dollars. By the time we caught up with him, he actually had to testify in a trial and in New York as a consequence of one of his cases, and his identity was exposed. And he was no longer kind of tapped into that New York Muslim network that had once made him a valuable asset to the FBI. And, as a consequence, he hadn't been offered a case in nearly 6 years. And the case that he was offered, the one that we ended up documenting, turned out to be a pretty small fish, and he wasn't making a lot of change from it. He was barely getting reimbursed for gas expenses, and so I think he saw the writing on the wall that, this career is not one that's going to continue to pay as handsomely as it once did, and the personal costs are high. And I think one way to perhaps alleviate that is to kind of have his story told in depth, in full, by someone that he trusted, who would contextualize his experience and help potentially explain his decisions to the community that had exiled him for becoming an informant.
So once you guys agreed to do this, how did this project evolve? You just you said, okay, let's go, and you started filming both together, one at a time, and how did it sort of build as you photographed him for a while?
Yeah, we were both present during most of the shoots, but we just simply started. Half the battle is showing up. Yes. And again, because sort of I did have this previous relationship with him, it's not like we were starting afresh. I mean, what was new was the fact that the camera was present. I mean, that was something that he had to acclimate too. That is something that he had to sort of learn how to be around and how to be himself in the presence of the lens. But I think, the previous relationship helped because there was over 10 years of history there. And so, I had built a relationship with Saeed outside of the film. I called him as a person. I called him to check in and see how he was doing. And so, the fact that I had those conversations, by the time the camera sort of came into the equation, he was fully prepared because we had been sort of relating with each other as humans for the previous decade.
So I'm curious, we don't have a whole lot of time today, but I'm curious about how your feelings about the FBI and what they're doing evolved during the production of the film here. David, if you want to start with that.
Yeah, I think, I personally walked into this, project with a very critical eye on the FBI's tactics and their use of informants, and that critique has only intensified and expanded and grown by leaps and bounds, through the course of actually working on this film and seeing up close what a counterterrorism investigation looks like. And, we are spending $1 trillion a year on the war on terror, and there's been almost no effort to offer transparency to the public about how that money is being spent and what are we getting for that vast sum of money. And this particular program is a small slice of that pie, but it's a critical one because it helps to reinforce in the public imagination the ever-present and local threat of terrorism. Every 2 weeks these cases are announced where a terrorist plot has been discovered, and time again, those cases are the result, the culmination of these relationships. One that we portray in the film of someone preying upon someone else who is in a desperate situation. The assertion by the FBI that we are finding people that Al-Qaeda could potentially radicalize is absurd. There's no evidence, no previous examples of Al-Qaeda spending months or even years trying to convince white Muslim converts from Pittsburgh who sell books out of their own home online, who don't have a driver's license, who don't have a job, who have a criminal record, who have no access to any sort of network or any sort of funding, that they would put that much energy into trying to get this person to participate in jihad, and saying, we instead of Al-Qaeda catching them, we've caught them, and America, you can sleep easy tonight.
So was there anything specific that you saw during the years of doing this that kind of shocked you that they, were that crazy to do that?
I mean, well, what's shocking is the degree to which sort of the FBI surveillance is running amok in the Muslim community. There's physical surveillance. They're inundating Muslim American communities throughout the United States with informants. And from having spent intimate time with one throughout the production of this film, the things that the FBI would ask him to do in the Muslim community in the name of national security, such as going to a mosque on Friday and simply recording the license plates of every license plate you're able to gather in the parking lot. This is information he would deliver to the FBI. Now that type of warrant, that type of blanket surveillance without a warrant on private property is very, very disturbing, because who knows what may come of that analysis, of that sort of data that Saeed is providing. It seems very innocuous when you realize that a whole community based on one person is being sort of subject to this. You don't even know what level. I mean, the FBI has different levels of its investigation. We're not privy to knowing whether that was at a preliminary investigative stage that Saeed was sent to get that, or he might not have known, because a lot of his information is a need-to-know basis, and the FBI does not tell him really information to put things in the proper context in terms of the larger case. And so there's really no way of knowing if the, sort of the benign information like license plates are going to be used in service of like the FBI's full investigation of someone in that mosque. And so it was very interesting to me to see sort of the means, that seem very harmless. People would say, if you're not doing anything, why are you worried about the FBI collecting license plates? But it's so invasive. You never know whose car could be in that parking lot. But the point is, anyone is open to this level of surveillance when the FBI chooses to send one person, one human asset, into a community.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely amazing what they can do once they get your license plate or any little piece of information. It's sort of, as you're talking about this, it really made me think about COINTEMPORARY. Back in the day, we're also showing the documentary about the Black Panthers. But the peace movement, that the FBI was doing the same thing, gathering a lot of information and sort of doing the same thing. But we always think of like, well, that was back then. Now we're a much more enlightened society. We don't have the evil people running the FBI that we did then. But there's so much fear at every level when you just hear people, talk about Muslims around Dallas. I mean, there are problems that we have here in Texas with it. Just people go crazy, and then the FBI is going like totally insane. And this film like gives you pause to like totally understand it and to see it. I mean, before I saw this film, you thought they're crazy. Now you know it. You see it. It's like it's important that people understand what's really here, and we have this rare window into this universe, and it's really kind of amazing that you guys got access and a character willing, and we're able to stick with it to kind of show us. I mean, to me, it's a film that like everybody needs to see.
Thank you.
I couldn't agree more.
And speaking of that, the film will, aside from our festival, which will be shown Friday night, it's a really good spot at our festival at the Angelica Theater, because it's a film we know that everybody needs to see. But later it's going to be distributed nationally in like regular movie theaters as a regular movie, right?
Yeah, we're beginning the national release right now. It also is going to be broadcast nationally in 2016, so people will have the ability to watch it then as well, if they don't catch it at the festival or in theaters.
And it will be in theaters beginning October 7th in New York at the IFC Center.
So we don't want to give too much away because people need to see this film and experience it. But can you tell us a little bit about what's happened to the characters in the film since the making of the film, if you want to?
Do you want to say anything, Lyric, or best to kind of keep it?
I mean, what has happened to the characters? I mean, everyone has experienced a host of sort of repercussions, but I would say probably the most pressing is Saeed himself is no longer activated. An FBI informant is technically considered deactive after 6 months of no work or contact with the FBI. And so that's probably the most recent update with Saeed is that, he, after working for the Federal Bureau of Investigation for over 23 years, they are no longer returning his calls. They're no longer in communication with him. I mean, he's had sporadic periods wherein, he was unable to reach an agent because they might be on vacation or,
right.
For whatever reason, they'll get back to him in a month. But this has actually been more than 6 months of no contact. And so I think it's fair to say that his career effectively is over. And I think he sort of understands that.
So does he have some other way of making money, or is he saved enough? Is he doing okay?
There are no savings because sort of, as an FBI counterterrorism informant, sort of it's optional for you to pay taxes. This is actually, this is actually tax-free, steady money. You cannot make the equivalent sum of cash, but for criminal activity. And he's a felon. And so these are literally the possibilities that he's weighing. He's like, can I work for the government and sort of continue to make this rapid cash that I need to sort of care for my young son? Or my back is against the wall. I live in sort of a town where there's limited employment available for me as a former felon. And so it's almost he's in this uncanny position where he's weirdly dependent on the government. And so now it's very hard for him to look for alternate means of employment at his age, at this stage of life.
And he's not a young person. It's hard to get, work at that age. It's kind of tough. And he has served his country in a very delicate way. I mean, it's a huge burden to do what he did emotionally.
I mean, that's just one final thing. It's we praise these agents, for their heroism for defending us from terrorist attacks, even though that it might be kind of a false heroism, and yet there's men like Saeed who are kind of ignored and left in the alleyways of history, and certainly in the margins of public favor and public praise. It's a hypocrisy that our government and our intelligence agencies build themselves up, bloat their budgets on the backs of these men, and yet cast them aside as the expendable nothings that they obviously consider them to be.
One last thing, because I know you guys got to get to work. I'm curious, as filmmakers, are you worried? Have you been worried about repercussions from the FBI and from the government? I'm sure at some point you've had some contact from them, or have you?
We formally asked the FBI for comment. They did not respond, sort of as we make mention of in the film. However, a couple of FBI agents have unofficially come up to us at screenings and have identified themselves as members of the FBI, as FBI agents who particularly work in counterterrorism. But aside from that, we have not had any direct contact.
So you don't think that your computers are being monitored, or there's a little bug in your house, or anything like that?
Well, as everyone who's seen Citizen 4 knows, everyone's being monitored and everything's being vacuumed up and sent to Utah for storage.
Yes. The question is, will they actually look at it, or is it just sitting in storage someplace?
But I will put this on the record. I can say that, so in terrors, we sort of actively sought comment from the FBI. We did not get it. I'm now working on a project wherein I've sought comment from the DOJ and the FBI again, and it's just fun. And I'm FOIAing materials. So it's very interesting to me to see myself being denied, because when I sort of passed the task on to a coworker, they were able to get the information. So I think there's definitely something with my name that is definitely, the government is a little less than forthcoming with providing information to my investigative projects and film.
Which leads me to my last question, unless you have a question for me. We got a little bit of what you're working on. Do you want to tell me a little more about that?
Oh no, you'll see it soon. It'll be on television. It's a short documentary. It'll be on Pivot early next year.
Okay. And what are you working on?
It's probably too soon to really discuss at length, but I'll stay tuned on our Facebook page and website and all that stuff, and social promotion.
Yes, terrordocumentary.org, at TerrorDoc on Twitter, Terror Documentary on Facebook. Please, we're always social media friendly. We do respond.
Well, thank you so much for spending time with us tonight. And please, after the film, when the film is playing theatrically in Dallas, let us know. We will send it out to all of our folks. When you play at our festival, we feel like you're part of our family, so we look forward to showing the new projects you're working on as they get made. And really, thank you for making this film. It's very important for us to see this universe, which is otherwise completely hidden from us, and I think it's a really important work. And so thank you so much.
Thank you for putting eyeballs on it.
Yes, and thank you for the interview.
Thank
you for programming us.
Well, of course. I knew, from 30 seconds into the film when I saw it, that this was something I wanted our audience to see. So thank you guys so much, and we'll talk later.
Sounds good.
Be well.